Welcome to the Car Guys, and this week we're going to try and fix the controversial, secretive, and many of you say unfair allocation system for Porsche GT cars. How can real Porsche fans and drivers get their hands on these special cars before the garage queen collectors and the speculators do? Many of you will have seen my recent Porsche rant against my former Porsche authorised dealer. In that episode, I touched on the GT allocation issue and the farcical allocation system that exists right now. We're talking about the GT3, the GT3 RS, the GT2 RS, and also a host of special variants, and with the new 992 generation of GT cars on the cusp of being launched. Yes, that's right. It's all going to start all over again. I've been sent hundreds of your stories about buying these cars, and the current way to get a Porsche GT car appears to be one of these 5 options. Number 1, you buy lots of cars you don't want, like Macans and Cayennes. Number 2, you agree to sell the cars back to the dealer quickly so that you can both share in the increased market value. Number 3, you spend a vast amount of money with the dealership group overall, including possibly fleet purchases. Number 4, you have a friend who's a Porsche salesperson and you agree with him to get a car and then immediately split it for profit. And number 5, you actually get one of these cars legitimately by putting your name down and being selected by the dealer. Anyone else, including new customers, you can forget it. Everyone, it seems, knows about the situation, everyone moans about it, but no one seems prepared to offer some solutions as to how to fix it. So let's get in the GT3 Touring, go for a drive, let's discuss it. So that's what we're going to discuss today. Is there a better way for the Porsche GT allocation system to work? What could it be? Now, from talking to many of you, and thank you for all of your stories that you had, good and bad, that you left in my last Porsche episode, there appears to be 2 possible new routes for Porsche to take. Number 1, dedicated GT Porsche dealers, and number 2, direct ordering from Porsche Motorsport itself. So let's talk about the Porsche dealers first. Now, obviously, the idea of having separate dedicated Porsche GT dealers is probably a bit far-fetched. After all, we're talking a lot more premises, a lot more work. So the most obvious idea would be to create mini GT dealers within the current existing dealer network, and that wouldn't require that much work at all. You would have to have entirely separate sales representatives working for those GT dealers. The main dealership in no way should be saddled with the targets of the GT dealership, and the GT dealership should be in no way affected with any of the targets for Macans and Cayennes and Boxsters and Caymans. Allocations would be based on Porsches that you currently own, not necessarily ones that you've owned in the past, particularly ones that you may have sold relatively quickly. And the allocation would not be based on spend, so it would not be in any way related to the amount of money that you had spent with the main dealership. It would be on track record, and it would be on planned usage. All sales targets and incentives for those GT salespeople would not be reliant in any way on the main dealership, and in fact the decision on who gets the cars ultimately would have to be made by Porsche, not by an individual sat in a dealership. That would prevent any accusations of impropriety or collusion. The dedicated dealers would in fact be there to aid in the selection and speccing process and to generally provide a point of contact locally for the customers. Their incentives would be based on how well they are doing the job, not with how much money they've made from car sales or from options. And it goes without saying that if you flipped a car, you need to be banned from all the dealers, not just your local one. I think it's practically possible for Porsche to implement. I think it could be a step forward because it wouldn't put the sole responsibility for allocations on the salesperson or the dealer principal, and therefore they could not be accused of giving the cars to their mates. And most importantly, it would break the link between people having to buy many different Porsche in order to qualify for a GT car. It would prevent dealers from being able to use that carrot and stick method, and it would keep the GT car allocation separate and pure. GT dealers would themselves assess the suitability of the clients for those cars. They would then fill out internal documentation which would be sent directly to the Porsche GT department, and then they would be decided upon at group level. And I think track record would have to play quite an important part, because if, for example, you have a history of getting the latest car and then mysteriously selling it back to that dealer whilst it is still worth considerably more than it was new, or if, for example, there are people who mysteriously have got cars who probably shouldn't have done in the past and then immediately sold them, again, that would be a red flag. So what do you think of that idea? Do you think that would work? And then, of course, there's option 2, going direct. So this is a method where you would apply directly to Porsche Motorsport for your car. There would be absolutely no dealer involvement whatsoever, no personal recommendation, no nudge, nudge, wink, wink, let's give them the car. None of that occurs. You simply fill out an online application process, very much like the Ford GT did, or more specifically, the track-only focused 935 Special. You would fill out a special online ordering process, direct, it would go straight to them, and then who gets the cars is decided by Porsche Motorsport themselves. Now this to me seems like the fairest system, because let's face it, Porsche Motorsport are unlikely to be influenced by bribes or by matey friendships. Every application will be judged on the basis and the merits and accuracy of the information provided, and there'll be an emphasis on track record and purchasing history and what the user actually plans to do with the car. This is the Porsche 935 application form that I actually filled in. I didn't get a car, but I in no way was begrudging of the process. It seemed very transparent and very obvious. You fill in your personal details, but then straight away it asks you about what you plan to do with the car, what your racing pedigree is, what cars do you currently own, when you bought them, where you bought them from, what the mileage is, what the annual mileage is expected to be, the VIN numbers. Annual mileage expectation is important, for example, because it will ascertain whether these cars are going to become garage queens, whether they're being bought specifically by collectors to just look pretty in a garage and never actually used, or whether they are going to get out and get dirty, as this GT3 Touring most certainly is. All those sort of information that would allow them to assess what kind of Porsche customer are you, and are you the sort of person that should get one of the GT cars based on merit, not just based on overall spend. And I really like that. I think it's a very interesting system. That could be backed up, obviously, with their records of past purchases, and this agreement would be covered by an ironclad clause that would mean that you couldn't sell the car for a certain amount of time. You'll notice the 935 application asks specifically whether people plan to track the cars, because of course Porsche love to see their cars being driven in the manner to which they are built. So if you have a GT3 RS, Porsche very much likes it when you take it on track. As you can tell, all of these ideas I think are designed to try and make sure that the cars are going to people who are going to actually drive them and enjoy them. I think that is the point overall. Nobody wants to see a world where all of the GT3 and GT2 RSs are bought by people who either lock them away and look at them in shiny garages, or immediately sell them and make 200 grand and divvy that out amongst the people that helped them get the car. I don't think anyone really wants to see that continuing, and I think therefore Porsche needs to step up and implement something that's going to stop a lot of these practices. And remember, these practices appear to be quite well known. You've sent me hundreds of messages talking about all the various ways that these cars are being obtained. So it is obviously quite open knowledge about the methods that are going on here, and therefore I would have thought relatively simple for Porsche to limit them where possible. It's never going to be a foolproof system, obviously, but it may help to refine the process going forward. And if you don't get a GT car, hey, you're not really going to be that gutted, because you understand the process, it was transparent, and you just didn't get one. That is a far fairer system, I think, than always having a suspicion that the dice were loaded against you from the start. But what do you think? I knew that I wasn't getting a 992 GT car because I simply hadn't played the game hard enough, and I kind of accepted that. But I think what's clear is that the market correction has to come from Porsche itself, and I think either of those two suggestions, and particularly the go direct route, are very easily implemented. So there you go. What do you think? Do either of those options fly for you? Will they improve things? Is there something else I'm missing? The key issues, as far as I can see, is the lack of transparency, the fact that the allocation appears to be based on amount of money spent or how the money is spent with a dealer and not based on merit. There really are not any penalties that are visible or that people can put their finger on to say that people flipping cars are being blacklisted at all, because in lots of cases it would appear, according to you, that it's being done with the collusion of the dealers themselves. So this situation will never change until that power is taken away from them. And to be honest, from those dealers that contacted me, most of you are sick of it as well. You all hate being bothered about the GT cars way in advance before they're ever announced. You hate the fact that you've got to tiptoe around a group of fairly vocal owners who demand to get the cars, and of course not all of them will, so you have to try and manage that situation. I actually think the dealers themselves would like to rid themselves of this pressure, and let's face it, Porsche's shoulders are plenty broad enough to deal with this situation. So there you go. I hope you found this episode thought-provoking. I hope there were some interesting ideas raised and it's made you think a little bit more about how this situation can be fixed. If you like what we're doing on The Car Guys, please subscribe, leave comments and likes. We read pretty much every comment and we reply to many of them. There'll be another Car Guys episode along next week.